Greetings, class. We're going to have a lesson here on participial phrases. This is lesson 5, unit 7. I'd like you to take out your books, open up to page 361 at this time. You can follow along as we go through our virtual lesson here. So just a little bit of review. Participles. We began, before the break, began talking about verbals. So verbs that could also be other parts of speeches, not just verbs. So we went through what were called participles. Then we're going to go through what we call gerunds, and then we're going to go through what we call infinitives. So we had a lesson a couple weeks ago on participles. Some of you have already handed that work in to me. And so we did have that lesson. That was a live lesson. And if you recall, participles were verbal. So they were verbs that end in ed or ing that can be used as adjectives. And we took them as single words. Now they can be the beginnings or part of what's called a participial phrase. So participles that make phrases. And that's what this lesson is about today. So please follow along on page 361. You see it there on the screen. We'll start with right below the 1-minute warm-up. If you want to do that on your own, you can. We're gonna skip that for now. So it says sometimes right below that a participle is accompanied by other words that complete its meaning. Amazed by his success. Now notice amazed is a participle. It can be a verb, but it's not used as a verb in this case. It's actually the beginning of a participial phrase that are also going to serve as adjectives. So amazed by his success, the scientist continued his work. So who do you think that the amazed by his success modifies? Now, since it's an adjective phrase, it has to modify a noun. So who or what, remember which one, what kind, or how many? Those are the questions that adjectives answer about nouns. So which, or who rather, was amazed by his success? That would be the scientist. So scientist is what that's modifying there. Number 1, it says a participle and its accompanying words make up a participial phrase. A participial phrase, like a participle alone, modifies a noun or a pronoun. So there you see, sitting in his office, he reread the instructions. So who is that modifying? That would be modifying the pronoun he. Notice that sitting can be a verb, but it's not a verb in this case. It's the beginning of a participial phrase. Notice number 2, the words that complete a participial phrase may be one or more prepositional phrases. Okay, so basically what you do is you find the verbal. You find the word that could be a verb, but it's not in this case. It's going to end in either ed or ing. So look for the ed, ing words. So look at that next sentence. Thomas Edison experimenting, I think we have a winner. There's an ing word, and then a lot of times what you'll see in these phrases, you have a bunch of prepositional phrases strung together, and they all become a part of that participial phrase. So experimenting with different materials, there's one prepositional phrase. In his laboratory, another prepositional phrase. All of that is the participial phrase. Now, all of that is going to be modifying Thomas Edison because he was the one experimenting with different materials in his laboratory. Also notice that when the participial phrase is in the middle of the sentence, it gets set off with commas. So a participial phrase may contain a direct object. It may contain an adverb that modifies the participle. So look at that next example there. Fearing failure, so there we have our ing or ed word, fearing, and that would be a participial phrase. Doesn't have a prepositional phrase after it, but as a direct object. So that becomes all part of one participial phrase. And then look at the next example. Then, steadily gaining confidence, he succeeded. Now, gaining in this case is the participle. Steadily can't be the participle because it doesn't end in ed or ing, nor can it ever be a verb. But sometimes you'll have adverbs and direct objects in it. And that one's a little easier to tell just because it's all enclosed with commas, so you know it's all part of one phrase. And what is that participial phrase modifying? Well, look for a noun or a pronoun in that sentence that it modifies. Steadily gaining confidence. You see what it modifies? Well, your choices are either then, he, or succeeded. Since he's a pronoun, that's going to be your winner, right? Number 3, you will not confuse the main verb of a sentence with a participial phrase as long as you first identify the subject and the simple predicate of the sentence. All right, so if it's something that the subject is doing, it's a verb, and it can't be a participle or a participial phrase. Number 4, a participial phrase may come before or after the word it modifies. If too many words come between the participle and the word it modifies, however, the meaning becomes unclear. That can get further, you can get further work on that by doing the 1-minute warm-up. It kind of deals with that. So if you look at where it's misplaced, John created a robot experimenting in his lab. Kind of makes it, the position of the participial phrase makes it sound like the robot was experimenting in his lab, but we know that most likely John was doing that, and so we'd have to move it. Experimenting in his lab, comma, notice the comma setting off the phrase, John created a robot. So you got to make it more clear. If you look at the 1-minute warm-up, there's an example of that as well. All right, so turn the page 362, please. Number 5 now, it says use a comma after a participial phrase that introduces a sentence. Also use commas to set off a participial phrase following the subject if the phrase is not necessary to the meaning of the sentence. So you could just say, so let's look at the first one. Struck by joy, D laughed. So here's an example where if a participial phrase begins a sentence, you need a comma after it. It's kind of like a subordinate clause. When it began a sentence, you had to put a comma after it. But remember that when you had a subordinate clause in a complex sentence and it came at the end, you didn't have to put a comma there. So keep that in mind. And also that next sentence, Dan waving goodbye drove away. You could take that phrase out and it would say Dan drove away. But you do have the words waving goodbye in there. That is a participial phrase, but it really doesn't change the meaning. I mean, it gives more information about Dan, but it could stand alone. It's not necessary to the meaning. It just gives more information. So then you need commas separating them. So I'd like to point your attention to the summing up part in the middle of page 362. There it says a participial phrase is made up of a participle and its accompanying words. Participle phrases may contain direct objects, prepositional phrases, and adverbs, and we saw a whole bunch of examples of that on page 361. All right, let's practice some of these. Look at number 1. The directions say identify each participial phrase. Which word does it modify? Number 1, how could someone photograph objects moving rapidly? Okay, so we scan. Do we see an ed or ing word anywhere? Aha, there it is, moving. Yeah, moving. All right, so then we take a look at the words after it. All right, is there a prepositional phrase after it? No, does not appear to be a prepositional phrase after it, but what is that after it? What do we call that? Ends in ly. Yeah, that's an adverb, right? And so now we have our phrase, moving rapidly. Okay, what are we modifying here? Well, what is moving rapidly? What word in there? Are photographs moving rapidly? Objects, right? So objects would then be the word it modifies. Let's go to number 2. See an ed or ing word there? Aha, facing. Yeah. All right, so facing inventors. So we have our phrase, right? Now, tell me what is facing inventors? Question, right? Are the 1870s facing inventors? Is Sirius facing inventors? No, that adjective is not facing inventors. So question, right? And keep in mind, these are participial phrases. They're adjective phrases. So all of these words that you modify will be a noun, right? Person, place, thing, or a pronoun. Let's look at number 3. Meeting the challenge, one photographer found a solution. Let's see, E-D-I-N-G. Oh, ing word, meeting is there. Meeting the challenge, okay, and it's set off with a comma, so there's a clue, right, that it begins a sentence. That must be the phrase. All right, so who or what is meeting the challenge here? Is the solution meeting a challenge, or is the photographer meeting the challenge? So the answer, the word that it modifies would be photographer. Look at number 4. All right, this one, I don't see any ing words here, huh? Where is that ed word? Oh, I see arranged. How about you guys? You see arranged? Okay. Arranged in a row, in a row, in a row, in a row. Preposition in, row, object of the. That's a prepositional phrase if I ever saw one. Along a racetrack, that seems to be a prepositional phrase as well. All right, so that whole thing is the participial phrase. Arranged in a row along a racetrack. All right, so what was arranged in a row along a racetrack? Were assistants arranged in a row along? Was a photographer or were cameras? My vote would be for cameras. How about you? All right, so arranged in a row along a racetrack, that whole thing, bunch of prepositional phrases strung together, modifying cameras. All right, I think you probably got the gist of this, but let's just keep going just in case. Number 5, running. That's an ing word. Hey, there we go. Running past the row of loaded cameras. That whole thing's going to be the phrase. So what was running past the row of loaded cameras? I think a horse is probably doing that, right? So a horse would be the word it modifies. All right, last one. For the first time, people saw something moving in a picture. There's an ing, moving. Moving in a picture, got a prepositional phrase after it. So the participial phrase, moving in a picture. And let's see, what was moving in a picture? Were people moving in a picture? No, people were the ones seeing something moving in a picture. So that one maybe was a little trickier, but so really focus on what exactly is it modifying. So what exactly is it talking about? Because the people were not moving in a picture, right? The something was moving in a picture. Whatever that something is, we don't know. It doesn't tell us. All right, so that's our lesson for today. If you want to rewatch it, go ahead. If you want to work through more examples under the pages 362, 363, go for it. I would really encourage you before you started on your assignment, which by the way was a worksheet in your paper packet that you received, I passed those out to you that morning, that you all came and got your stuff. And all the rest of the ones for the week are in that packet as well. So I'll make one of these for each lesson. I won't make one of these for the review lessons, but which comes later after the chapter's done. But I'll just ask that you rewatch these again. I would also encourage you to watch the Powtoons that Mrs. Wilcox put on YouTube that we use quite commonly in class. And between the two of those, that'll help. If you still have questions on things, please reach out via email. I'll be checking that from you. All right. Okay. Happy studying. Hope your homework's doing well, and hope you're making the best of all this virtual learning. We're all kind of going through this for the first time. So, all right. We'll see you tomorrow.